Hi everyone, this is Daniel Cho. I'm the Managing Director of Pathways to Wholeness Lifestyle Medicine and the North York Lifestyle Medicine Clinic. I'm here at our North York Lifestyle Medicine Clinic in Toronto, and you're listening to another episode of the Lifestyle is Medicine podcast. I have on the line Dr. George Cho, our Medical Director, and today we're going to talk about what I personally find is one of the most exciting and best aspects of lifestyle medicine. And that is how lifestyle medicine gives us freedom. I think for many people, when they think about healthcare and disease, they feel trapped. They feel like they're dependent on the system. They're dependent on drugs, usually multiple drugs, and their disease that they're experiencing. And today we're going to talk about how lifestyle medicine is completely different from that and how it can give us freedom and become less dependent. So let's first talk about what do you think about freedom when you think about that word? What comes to mind?
Freedom. When we talk about freedom, we talk about self-determination. So being able to kind of determine your own life, and independence. So being independent of, or less dependent on other things, but being able to live your life as you will.
Yeah, when I think about freedom, it's one of these words that have been really, it's pregnant with meaning, I think, throughout human history. I think lots of human history is a struggle for freedom. We think about these wars and the oppression that people have experienced. Even today, all around the world, people don't have freedom because of different governments or whatever. So I think freedom has been sort of this like word that's been like a rallying call throughout human history and really powerful.
For sure. And, going back to your intro, in clinic, I've yet to meet a patient who is excited to be taking drugs, is excited to meet their doctor. Most people want to be free from these things, right? But many people, they feel chained to their drugs and chained by their disease. And we need to ask ourselves, those of us in the medical field, is there a way to help our patients be free from the system itself and be able to live an independent, a self-determined life? And I think the answer is yes. As you mentioned, I think lifestyle medicine is the answer to that.
So how does lifestyle medicine do that? How does lifestyle medicine give us freedom when it comes to healthcare, disease?
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned on it a little bit in your intro. Lifestyle medicine, it promotes freedom for the patient by making them less dependent on doctors, first of all.
Okay.
It makes patients less dependent on drugs and medications and surgeries and the system itself. It makes them less dependent on the medical system, and even the disease itself. Everyone wants to be free from disease, chronic diseases, and when we look at lifestyle medicine, it helps or potentially helps reverse diseases, and so it makes people free from diseases as well. So those are kind of some of the ways that lifestyle medicine helps people or promotes freedom for the patients.
So let's talk about this being less dependent on doctors. So how does lifestyle medicine help us to become less dependent on doctors? And is that even a good thing? Like, I think many people, maybe in the healthcare system, they might think like, is that even a good thing?
Right. Well, I'm gonna share some stats later on, but those in the medical system, especially drug companies, they might not want that because they're making huge amounts of money off the sale of drugs.
Right.
But when we think about the patient's perspective, and I always think that that doctors should think from the patient's perspective, what's best for the patient, and what's best for the patient is not to be dependent on the system. We need to help people live self-determined, healthy lives. And the way that lifestyle medicine does that is that it gives people the tools that they need to live a healthy life, to potentially reverse and also prevent the medical conditions. So exercising, eating a healthy diet, sleeping well, less stress, things like that, are things that patients themselves need to implement. On the reverse, when we look at conventional medicine, their method is surgeries, injections, and pills. But in order to get those things or have access to those things, you need a prescription from the doctor. Thus, you need to go through the doctor in order to get access to those things. So you're dependent on the doctor, right? In lifestyle medicine, it's totally different. The doctor may educate you on maybe what is the best diet, on how to exercise and so forth, but you don't need to keep on going back to the doctor to get access to exercise, to healthy nutrition. The onus becomes on the patient themselves. Now, that might be scary to some people because the responsibility is now on themselves, on the patient. But, with freedom comes responsibility.
Right.
And it's better to have freedom with responsibility than have dependence with no responsibility, right? So the doctors are not the medium by which you can access a healthy lifestyle. It's the patient themselves who must go out and live a healthy lifestyle. That is freedom. You're less dependent on the doctor. The doctor is merely an educator.
Isn't that sort of like that kind of messaging kind of putting you out of business, out of a job, to say that, I don't want, a patient comes and you're going to give them advice on how to live a healthy lifestyle so that you become less dependent on me? Isn't that sort of like you're working yourself out of a job almost?
Yeah, but like I said, I think the doctors, we need to do what's best for the patient, not necessarily for ourselves. Especially because we're dealing with the health of the patient, not ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So, and we know, the World Health Organization, they said by 2020, so in just a year and a half, the vast majority of our diseases will be lifestyle-related diseases. So doctors, if we understand that we know then that for these patients that's coming to us, a vast majority of the conditions are lifestyle-related. So we need to then help them to change their lifestyle in order to deal with their medical conditions. This means that what is best for them is not to become dependent on us, but to help them to live a healthy lifestyle. So if we think from the patient's perspective, we have to ask, what is best for them? And obviously it is not to be dependent on us for their lifestyle conditions. It's to help them live a healthy lifestyle so they can, move on without the need for us.
Yeah, ultimately, I think as health care providers, we want to see a world that's healthier and free of disease. And
of course,
we have to have that selfless attitude and not really think about ourselves. We're here to serve, ultimately.
Yeah, and I want to just quickly add, I think most doctors, they want their patients to get better, right?
Yeah.
Most doctors, they want to do what's best for the patient, but unfortunately, with conventional medicine right now, doctors are not trained to. First of all, we get very little training in nutrition, in exercise, in lifestyle medicine. We get very little training in that, and also there's the powerful arm of the pharmaceutical industry that has its hands on training, on the training of medical doctors and things like that. So then it becomes very difficult for doctors to think in lifestyle medicine terms or in a lifestyle medicine framework, and therefore they're not able to address lifestyle with their patients. So I think that most doctors, they want to do what's best for the patient. I don't know if there's any doctor that wants to keep on seeing their patient over and over again and keep on prescribing them more drugs. I don't think there's a doctor that really enjoys doing that. They want to see their patients get better. Mm-hmm. But a lot of doctors don't have the tools or the training in order to do that. But with lifestyle medicine now rising up, I think more and more doctors are getting trained, and therefore we see an improvement in that. So I say that to say that, let's not look down on the doctors, because I think a lot of doctors, they have very good intentions, very good hearts, but it's just the lack of training is very lacking.
And I guess part of this being less dependent on doctors also is related to being less dependent on drugs. So can you talk about that, how lifestyle medicine kind of makes us less dependent on drugs? And I know that we touched upon it, but let's dive deeper.
Yeah, first let's just say right off the bat that we have a very huge drug problem in Canada. Just before we got online, I was just looking at some stats here from Statistics Canada, and They say that approximately 30% of Canadian adults 65 to 79 years old are on 3 to 5 prescription meds.
Wow.
These are prescription meds, 3 to 5 prescription meds. 30% of our seniors are on these meds. And then 11% of 45 to 64-year-olds, so middle-aged people, 11% are on 5 or more prescription meds. These are not including just over-the-counter medications that people can pick up, nor does this include supplements. So that's a lot. 30% of our seniors are on 3 to 5 medications, prescribed medications, not including supplements and over-the-counter drugs. And then it was very interesting. The top drug classes, or between the age of 25 to 79 years old, the top drugs that are being used by Canadians are lipid-lowering drugs, ACE inhibitors, peptic ulcer acid reducers for things like reflux, beta blockers, antidepressants. I mean, if you look at all these medical conditions, they're lifestyle-related medical conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. The top drugs right now are those drugs that are addressing lifestyle-related medical conditions, and the pharmaceutical industry is making tons of money off them, and people are dependent on these drugs. In fact, there was a report in the Canadian Medical Association journal where they talk about the most lucrative drugs. And the most lucrative drugs in Canada right now are antihypertensives, cholesterol-lowering drugs, drugs for inflammatory conditions, acid-lowering drugs, antidepressants, and so forth, and even and diabetes as well. Again, lifestyle-related drugs are the ones that are making the pharmaceutical companies the most money. This is very sad. That condition that can be addressed by eating healthier, exercising more, stress, and having better ways to deal with stress, that these medical conditions are the source, or patients with these medical conditions are buying these drugs and making oodles of money for the pharmaceutical industry. But lifestyle medicine can help people become less dependent on drugs. There are good studies out there that are demonstrating the power of healthy eating and so forth to help people reduce their medication intake. So, for example, there's a study called the BROAD study, where they got people with obesity, diabetes, and heart conditions and so forth, and they put them on a whole foods diet, and they compared that to another group they told to just do standard medical care. Not only did the whole foods plant-based diet group reduce their weight, BMI, waist circumference, and so forth more than those on the standard medical care, the medication use after 6 months dropped a lot in the whole foods plant-based diet group. After 6 months, in the control group, those who were doing standard medical care, the use of medication actually increased. And if you look at the graph, it's like a steep straight line up. So the lifestyle medicine group, the whole foods plant-based diet group, they dropped the medication use. Standard medical care group, they increased the medication use. And Neil Barnard, he did a study with the low-fat vegan diet for those with diabetes. And what he found was that the low-fat vegan group, they were able to reduce the medication use by 43% in those who are doing a low-fat vegan diet. On the contrary, what we know is that with standard medical care, those with diabetes often they have to add medications to their program. But here, Dr. Barnard, he showed that a low-fat vegan diet can help actually reduce medication use after 1 or 2 years or so by 43%, so nearly half. So these studies, and there are others, demonstrate that in this case, healthy eating, specifically a whole foods plant-based diet, can help people become less dependent on drugs. And I've seen this myself, where at places like Wildwood and even in our clinic here, where, you tell people to educate them on implementing the basics of lifestyle medicine. And they start to reduce their antihypertensive drugs, their cholesterol drugs. They go from 3 or 4 diabetes meds and down to 1 diabetes med. And patients are really grateful, really happy when they can reduce the amount of drugs that they take. So because lifestyle medicine addresses the root causes of lifestyle related diseases, which is a poor lifestyle. Because it's addressing the root causes, it therefore it starts to heal the body, and therefore when you're healing the body, then you don't need to take as many meds. On the contrary, a lot of drugs, they merely just mask the symptoms or address the symptoms, and therefore, since you're not really curing the medical condition, it keeps on progressing, and that's why people are told to take drugs for life. But lifestyle medicine seems to reverse that cycle.
And let's talk finally about freedom from disease. I know that in our clinic we see many patients, and when you hear their stories, it's like the condition kind of takes over their life, right? They feel chained to it, and it really affects the quality of life that people can live. So how does lifestyle medicine help with that?
Yeah, so contrary to what many people are told, a lot of these medical conditions, especially the common ones, the chronic ones like diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, high cholesterol, things like that, contrary to what people are told or kind of the impression that's left on the mind of the patient, these diseases are potentially reversible. And though patients are often told that they need to take drugs to address these conditions for life, the science demonstrates that when people implement lifestyle medicine principles, that these medical conditions are potentially reversible. And let me just share with you some evidence for that. So for instance, let's go back to Dr. Neil Barnard. He did a study where they put people on a vegan diet, and what they found was that after about 22 weeks or so, people on a vegan diet were actually able to bring their hemoglobin A1C below the cutoff for diabetes. So essentially, they reversed their diabetes. Same with another group in Korea. They did a study on a plant-based diet, and after 12 weeks, they were nearly reversed diabetes in their patients. And of course, there's Dr. Dean Ornish's study where they got people with coronary artery disease, and by implementing exercise, a healthy diet, a vegan diet, stress management, smoking cessation, these kind of things, they were actually able to start opening up the coronary arteries again. There's other studies with exercise. There's one research group. They got people to simply walk about, I think it was several times a week, and after a year, they were able to reverse hippocampal shrinkage. They're actually able to add volume to the hippocampus, essentially reversing age-related hippocampal loss. So, I mean, there's a lot of studies that are coming out now that suggest that lifestyle-related diseases are potentially reversible when you change the lifestyle. I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but really it needs to be emphasized. And if you're reversing the disease, then you're free from the disease and free from all the medications and the procedures that come with diseases. So that's very liberating to people when they are not chained by their disease. Because like you said, these chronic diseases can really take over the life, not just psychologically, but just it impairs their work, it impairs their social relationships. I had a patient who he came in with his wife, and he was he had a lot of excess weight, quite obese actually. And him and his wife, they hadn't had sex in years, they said. I mean, because of the weight, right? And then he was also experiencing some things with his heart and so forth. So I mean, these diseases are very debilitating, and if we can give people hope, some measure of hope, I think that'd be very, very beneficial to them. And I think the science definitely demonstrates that there is hope.
Yeah, I like that. I like how lifestyle medicine is a very hopeful message and very empowering as well. It says that we can really take our health into our own hands in many cases. And
right. Yeah, there's no guarantees, but there's a chance, and I would say maybe a good chance, and and lifestyle medicine is the way to do that.
Right.
So there, one last thing I want to say is that it is sometimes it is very intimidating when doctors, these people with white coats with a bunch of D's behind their name, when they come to you and they say, you have to take this drug for life, you have to do this surgery and so forth. It's very intimidating, and so often patients they think this is it, this is the answer, and they kind of like silo themselves into thinking this is the only thing out there. But lifestyle medicine provides a different perspective, and I want to encourage our listeners always to think when you have a medical condition, there are the drugs and the surgeries, and these might be beneficial, obviously, but are there also other answers out there outside of conventional medicine in the world of lifestyle medicine? And I believe that in many cases that there are good answers, and I want to encourage our listeners to seek for those answers and to make lifestyle changes in order to address many of these medical conditions, and not to just silo yourselves into thinking that tablets and pills and injections and surgeries are the only answer out there. They're obviously part of the solution, but not the only solution.
Great. So let's leave it at that for this episode. Thank you everyone for tuning in. As always, please do leave us a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. And if you want to learn more about lifestyle medicine and the evidence behind lifestyle medicine, we encourage you to check out lifestylemedicine.org, the website of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And also throughout this podcast and future episodes, we'll be sharing with you information and tips to how to implement a healthy lifestyle so you can really experience the freedom that you deserve. Also, if you do have a friend or a family member who you think could benefit from lifestyle medicine, please, we encourage you to share this podcast with them. So again, you've been listening to the Lifestyle is Medicine podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you next time.